one of the other things I have wondered, not having ever been a choreographer or a dancer for that matter, is how different is it for you, like when you're in studio and you're working with dancers and you're helping them learn the piece and you're creating the piece, to go from seeing the work like that to suddenly seeing it on stage and there's lights and there's, you know, maybe a live orchestra and there's full costumes. What's that contrast like? Does it feel unreal? Does it make the piece feel different?
I think entirely different. First of all, going from this close to where you guys are sitting, and also just the dancers transform when they get on stage. They just bring 50% more, and with the lighting, it gives the work always a new sense of depth, I find, and you sort of see the space differently, and the shapes you create are much clearer, and it's just a much sort of richer experience watching than in the studio.
Well, it's so different, and as a dancer, like it's just, sometimes that transition is very hard to make. Like you're really good in the studio, and you go on stage, and you can't do a thing because of those lights, and then you just, it's very frustrating. So it's frustrating as well for a choreographer. I was very lucky to work with a choreographer called Jean-Pierre Perrault in Montreal for many years, and he had this studio theater, and from the first day of his creation, we put the costume on. Wow. And we were under lights for the whole creation. That's how he would create. We would create in a place, like let's say in the theater. And what it would do is that you get used to that environment, that stage environment was your home environment. And I mean, of course, that's costly, but that's an incredible way to work because you wore your costume every day, and we were responsible to wash our costume every day. So it became our character a little bit. I've in certain times, but I've had the luxury to have, let's say, a theater for a week before. I found that as sort of the work is much more sophisticated at the end because the dancers are able to really feel what it feels like to be on stage. So that transition is not so hard. Right. So when I did the piece with my kids, we did that in our studio quite a bit because I was worried about that part. But of course, as soon as we went on stage, my daughter started to look at. Our math teacher was in the audience, and she goes, did her old solo for her math teacher, and she came off stage. She goes, "I saw my math teacher." I said, "I know that you saw that." It's very good, but then again, I use that as an example because what are you going to do? You have to live with that. That became the performance. You know, in that case, she's a very young kid, but you have to also, as a choreographer, let it go, and it becomes their thing. It's the dancers. It's their thing, so that you can control it to a point, but
once they're on stage, it's kind of
yeah.
Yeah, huge transition from the studio to the stage, absolutely, and from theater to theater also. I mean, I've been so used to this space, having been here for the last 5 years, and seeing so many things that I've put together in this space, and I realized when I went to San Francisco last year, and we were in a bigger theater that had a higher proscenium and a real pit, and there was a bit more distance from the audience, and suddenly it was like, oh, they were up there, and it was a picture, and it worked so much better for the piece that I was doing, because I did a sort of trial run of that piece here, and because this is such a huge, fantastic stage we have here, but because the audience is so close, you can see everything. There is nothing, you can't hide anything on this stage, which is it's fantastic to learn your craft on this stage because you really have to perfect it down to a T, because it's like, I call this stage being like under a microscope. It literally is like you can see everything. And when I got to San Francisco and saw a little more distant, I was suddenly exhaled and I thought, okay, it's actually going to work. The idea I had is going to work. It didn't work here at all, actually. I panicked when I saw it. So I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? But, and interesting to hear you talk about that process. And if I can just say a little bit about William Forsythe's process, we also spent an eternity on stage making new ballets. But he would make the material in the studio. So he would make a solo on you, he would make a duet on you too, and he would make trios and duets, and sometimes with no music at all, sometimes he'd bring in different music every single day, and we would try the same choreographic material with hip-hop music one day and classical music the next, and he would just wanted to see what worked best and what each dancer responded to. And then when he would put the whole thing together, that's when we would have our stage time. So we would know our material, and we would be in costume, and we'd have these like endless 12-hour rehearsals on stage. And it was all a little bit so nerve-wracking because you never actually knew if your fantastic solo was going to even make it into the piece. You know, you didn't know. You had no idea. And you'd be going through and you're like, okay, we're 40 minutes in and he still hasn't said, Sean, do your solo. And you're like, really? Is it going to happen at all? And some people's material didn't make it into the piece. And so it kept us all on this edge, too, of delivering our best performances at every single opportunity we had. And in one of the creations I remember most significantly for me anyway, I was really getting to the place of thinking all of my material is so not going to make it onto the stage at all. And in the end, it was the finale of the entire piece. And there was this beautiful light and this, you know, the whole piece was leading to that moment. So I got to kind of go, oh, thank you. So interesting how the process, you know, I mean, affects the dancers in such a unique kind of specific way. But also, I mean, the lights and the costumes and hearing the sound in a theater as opposed to a studio, it all just intensifies everything. So, I mean, you know, when it is flowing and it's working as it should, then it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. So it can be a pretty amazing moment when you see it on stage for the first time.
Yeah, this is interesting. I feel like actually I have maybe my choreography has the least big stage time out of any of ours here. And now I'm a little bit nervous. It's such a huge transition from studio to stage. I do think it's really interesting, like what actually all of you have been talking about dancers' transitions, how they handle that switch from studio to stage. And it's true that some dancers, it's like night and day. It's like a completely different dancer when the curtain goes up, and then other people, I don't know, just every dancer is different. And I guess if you haven't worked with them or you don't really know, I don't know. I did a piece, and I'm not going to use names, but somebody looked at the audience and smiled, and I almost started. Anyway, I lost it, but because please don't do that. Yeah, no, that is interesting, and as a dancer too, that's sometimes a difficult transition to maneuver. Yeah, but I'm really excited to get more of that and to see my work kind of hopefully from that San Francisco picture like that. I think that would be nice. I don't know, and I love lighting and costume, and it just brings work so much to life. Like dance without lighting is kind of, I don't know.
Flat.
Yeah, Christmas without sleigh bells or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's not right.
And then I think once it goes into performance, like the first sort of dress rehearsal when there's no one there and it goes on stage, you just think, wow, this is beautiful. But then it goes into performance and you just hit panic mode because you're used to being in control of the dancers, the steps, the lights, the music, and then all of a sudden the dancers are in control of the dancing and they're asking you, why are you nervous? You're not going on stage, but you're nervous for all 12 of them and the lighting and all their costumes. And so there's this really big release of control, which I hate.